going to read you something, and then I'm going to introduce you to the person that wrote it. No one said a word, not when the rescue worker slowly picked his way through the glass and twisted metal to reach the back seat of the pickup truck, not when he lifted out the black body bag, and not when he emerged cradling the smashed remains of the 1-year-old boy on the way to an ambulance as 2 Israeli jets roared overhead. The child had been dead for a day by the time the Red Cross worker arrived yesterday, lying face down and unseen in the Chevrolet Silverado after an Israeli airstrike. That was written by Oliver Marsden, who is in Aitou in northern Lebanon for the Times, or was when he wrote that. He joins me now from Lebanon. And I wanted to share your words, Oliver, because they sort of hit me very, very hard. And I read all the papers every day, as you can imagine. I know you don't write the headlines, and this one is in quotes anyway, but there are rules in war, but this is monstrous, is the headline under which your article appeared this morning. Why?
That's a quote from Father Esteban Frangio, who is the manager of the local hospital nearby. And that's what he was saying after, it's now 23 people were killed. He was saying that many of those who survived, they were coming to the hospital with injuries to their faces, to their eyes from the explosion, including children. He said 5 children, I believe. So that was a quote from him. And I think, there are many people on the ground who are extremely affected and extremely angry and sad about what is happening here and what happened there. And so, I can, that is his opinion, and he makes a good point, I believe.
And not least because the attack hit a refuge for displaced people, many of whom would have been making their way or fleeing north after attacks in the south. And I always note the presence of this word in some reports like this. It was a predominantly Christian area, which is why, of course, you were talking to a priest. How frustrating is it for you reporting on this region to recognise how little the people that you're writing for know about the region? Some people will be surprised to learn, for example, that there is a predominantly Christian area in the middle of Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, Lebanon is incredibly complex in that respect. It has a confessional power sharing system where the president is always a Maronite Christian, the prime minister is always a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament is always a Shia Muslim. Not many people know that. That came about after the 15-year bloody civil war here. And so it's a very complex region, but it's a very complex country, given that there are so many religious, sects within it. And so far, people have been getting along, and they do have their areas. Some of them are mixed, some of them aren't so mixed. And there has been unity over the years since the Civil War. And that is, unfortunately, as Father Esteban also said, it's being tested. He believes it's being pushed on purpose by the Israelis. So you have people, he said, he quoted that these people, these refugees, they're not from the moon. They are from Lebanon. People know each other. For example, many Lebanese have businesses abroad in West Africa. There are more Lebanese people who live in Brazil than live in Lebanon. There's a huge diaspora. And so these people go and work abroad, and it doesn't matter what religion they are. They mingle, they know each other, they come back. And so you have people from the Shia Muslim community fleeing the south, being put up in homes in Christian communities like they were in Aitou, and then these homes are being destroyed, and it is sowing a lot of fear now. People are scared to house the displaced from the south, and on top of that, their families have been displaced multiple times now. They left the south, they came to the southern suburbs of Beirut. Those have been hit. They're heading further north. It's almost as far north as you can go away from the fighting, and they're still being hit. And so there is many religions here, and there are Christian areas, and there are Sunni Muslim areas, there are Shia areas, and there are even Druze areas. So it's very complex.
Yes, I thank you for that. I think it's important that people understand that background in order to appreciate the level of confusion about why this area, among people up to and including Father Esteban, why this area was targeted by the airstrike. It's still in shrouds.
Yeah, it's still we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. As I mentioned in the report, someone who wasn't particularly known to the area, he had arrived to give out cash aid to those who'd been displaced, and 5 minutes later, the this home that was housing a lot of families from the south was hit. One thing I don't quite understand myself is that if it was a targeted assassination of a Hezbollah commander, we're still waiting to hear. I actually even sent, I sent the coordinates to the other
Mm.
side, asked for some explanations. They still haven't replied, or they say an investigation is still ongoing. But what I don't understand is, in the past, they have been able to hit people on highways and on roads. They've hit scooters on roads and cars on highways that are moving in areas where there aren't a lot of civilians around, or maybe they are on the highway, but they're not being as affected. So I don't understand why this person turned up and then 5 minutes later the whole building was hit. Surely they've been following him. They have drones buzzing all the time. We can hear them all the time. So there are eyes on what is moving and what is happening. So the timing of the strike is something that I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
I know that your feelings are irrelevant to the work that you do in the context of what ends up on the page. But when you have to write words like the Israeli military added, the claim that Lebanese civilians were killed as a result is under review, the incident is being examined, 7 or 8 paragraphs after describing the discovery of that dead baby, that must feel, to use an overused word, Oliver, that must be a slightly surreal experience for you.
Yes, I mean, it is surreal. I think it's not really about me. My job
I
is to
appreciate that.
and tell what's happening. It's not, it's never easy. I think you're mad if you go to these things and it's like water off a duck's back. Of course, it affects you and it's not easy. But I think what is surreal is what is happening to the Lebanese people on the ground. Not just the Lebanese. You have the migrant community. You have Syrians, displaced Palestinians. Everyone's being affected on both sides of this conflict. I think the fact that this is even happening is surreal.
And I suppose for people who've been following events as closely as we all should, the key difference between what's happening in Lebanon and what's happening in Gaza is that people like you can get there and report back.
Well, that's the thing, we cannot get into Gaza as much as we've pushed, as much as as many open letters that have been written and signed by multiple news agencies. We're not allowed into Gaza, and so we are on the ground, going to these sites, seeing these things, so that we can tell what's happening. The Israeli military was, dispute claims of stuff of what's happening in Gaza. I heard one of their spokesmen, one of the people from their party today, and he was saying that these reports that aid is not getting into Gaza, they're not true. In fact, that the aid has doubled and there is aid going in. I think they were talked about at the White House
Mm.
recently. And then, well, it's like, well, let us in. If you say it's going in, why don't you let us in and then we can say it's going in? But they won't let anyone in. So I can't say if it is going in or if it isn't going in. But there are incredible journalists on the ground in Gaza.
Of
There are
course.
Palestinians who have been working and dying, trying to report what's been going on. But if they want, they need a break as well. It's not just, it's not about sort of sending in foreign journalists to like do a better job or anything like that. They're doing an incredible job, but they've been doing this non-stop for almost a year. They just need a break, I think. So let the rest of us in to help them out.
Absolutely. And finally, the surviving victims of this latest airstrike, many of whom, as you write, were already displaced, many of them are now, as we speak, on the move again.
Hmm. Yes, I'm one of the women I spoke to. She had 5 children. She's just put them into a hotel. She was already paying $500 for this tiny apartment that she was renting on that next door to the building that was hit. And obviously her apartment was destroyed. People, where are people getting $500 a month from at the moment? Given that they've already been displaced she was displaced from the Bekaa Valley. So, her work is a long way and her home is a long way away from where she's been displaced to. Now they're being displaced again. I don't know where they're going to go. And I think not a lot of people know. And what's happening now here in Lebanon is that with the widening of these airstrikes, the scope of these airstrikes, there's a lot of fear. People were saying yesterday that nowhere feels safe.
Thank you, Oliver. Oliver Marsden, live from Beirut and reporting on recent events in Aitou, where you just heard the death toll is believed to have reached about 23, and already displaced people are now moving on once again.